"We don't waste our time polishing worthless scrap metal, ma'am. Try the pawn shop down the street." The cruel sneer silenced the flagship boutique. Senior sales clerk Chloe Harrison crossed her arms, looking down in disgust at the rain-soaked woman holding a scratched, tarnished silver band. Chloe had no idea the quiet customer standing before her in the wet beige trench coat was Victoria Thornton, the visionary designer and sole owner of the entire multi-million-dollar luxury brand. Victoria stood motionless beneath the golden lights, watching the employee wear her family's crest with cold arrogance. But before Victoria could speak a single word or reveal her identity, 28-year-old newly hired clerk David Miller stepped firmly between them, carrying a fresh velvet tray. "Every piece of jewelry that enters this store carries a lifetime of human memories, Chloe," David said, his calm, steady voice cutting through the suffocating tension. "If this lady has honored us by bringing her heirloom here, the least we can do is treat it with the respect it deserves." Chloe turned sharply on her high heels, her face twisting in rage at the probation trainee who had just dared to challenge her authority in front of the entire boutique. "You would do well to remember your place, David," Chloe hissed in a sharp, venomous whisper, stepping into his personal space until her polished name tag practically touched his chest. "You are on a 90-day probationary contract to meet aggressive sales quotas, not run a charity counter for people who clearly walked into the wrong neighborhood on a rainy afternoon. Look at her coat. Look at her shoes. She doesn't belong on this side of the boulevard." David did not flinch, nor did he return her spiteful glare with anger. Instead, he maintained his composed, professional posture, turning his full attention toward the rain-soaked woman. He offered Victoria a gentle, reassuring smile that instantly dismantled the boutique's icy atmosphere. "Good afternoon, ma'am," David said in a warm, resonant tone. "Please step over to the consultation desk. Let me take your wet umbrella and coat, and I will bring you a warm cup of herbal tea while we examine your ring together." Victoria studied him in silence as she walked to the private consultation alcove. She had founded this company alongside her father on a simple, sacred principle. Jewelry was never meant to be an arrogant trophy of wealth, but a vessel for human devotion, a marker of anniversaries, grief, promises, and love. Yet, over the past 2 years, aggressive private equity advisors and ambitious sales directors had corrupted her regional stores into cold, elitist galleries where ordinary citizens were measured by the brand of their handbag and dismissed without a second glance. Victoria had deliberately slipped into this flagship boutique on a stormy Tuesday without her security detail, executive assistant, or bespoke jewelry specifically to witness the unvarnished reality of her brand. What she found was a heartbreaking culture of corporate vanity, interrupted only by the quiet, defiant decency of a young trainee who refused to treat a stranger as invisible. Victoria sat down on the leather armchair, placing the tarnished silver band onto the soft black velvet pad. The ring looked humble under the high-intensity halogen spotlights designed to showcase 10-carat flawless diamonds. It had no sparkling halo, no platinum prongs, and no certificate from a Swiss laboratory. It was merely a thick band of oxidized metal, weathered by decades of physical contact with human skin, workbenches, and garden soil. David slipped on a pair of immaculate white cotton gloves. He picked up the ring with steady, respectful hands and raised a heavy brass jeweler's loop to his right eye. For 2 full minutes, the background noise of register bells, whispering customers, and soft classical music faded into complete insignificance. He rotated the piece millimeter by millimeter under the focused white beam of the desk lamp, inspecting every contour, weld, and microscopic groove. Across the room, Chloe stood near the cash registers, leaning against the glass counter and whispering to another senior saleswoman with an exaggerated roll of her eyes. David ignored them completely, his eyes widening with genuine fascination. "This isn't ordinary commercial silver," David said softly, lowering the brass loop and meeting Victoria's gaze with profound reverence. "The alloy has a rich copper base, typical of mid-century hand-poured ingots from the early 1960s, and these micro grooves along the inner band. This wasn't shaped by an automated laser machine or cast in a mass-production mold. It was chiseled by hand using an old steel burin tool. Whoever made this piece wasn't just working metal, they were pouring hours of deliberate patience into every strike of the hammer. Victoria felt a quiet, powerful stir in her chest. The ring had been forged by her grandfather in a modest basement workshop 60 years ago, long before the Thornton name became an international luxury trademark. "It belonged to someone very precious to me," Victoria replied softly, carefully controlling the emotion in her voice. "It is an heirloom from a marriage that survived for decades of hardship. I only wanted to know if it could be cleaned and reshaped without erasing the soul of the original metal." David's expression softened with deep understanding, his eyes reflecting the warm ember lamplight. "My grandfather was an independent bench jeweler and watchmaker for over 45 years, David shared in a hushed, nostalgic tone, resting his hands gently on the counter. He operated a tiny repair shop on the south side of the city. "He used to tell me that gold and diamonds are loud, but old silver whispers the true history of a family. He taught me that when a ring gets scratched, those scratches are not flaws, they are markers of honest labor, children raised, and meals cooked together. He passed away when I was 19, but he taught me to respect what a piece of metal means to a human heart long before I ever learned how to calculate a retail markup. Then why are you working the front sales counter of a commercial luxury boutique?" Victoria asked gently, leaning forward. David offered a modest, self-deprecating smile. "I graduated as a certified bench jeweler and gemologist 3 years ago, but independent workshops have mostly closed down in the city. When Thornton Jewelers advertised this trainee position, I applied the very same day. I've studied Victoria Thornton's design philosophy for years. The way she balances classical geometry with raw and treated gemstones is extraordinary. She always said in interviews that a jeweler is merely a guardian of human memories. I wanted to be close to that standard of excellence." He paused, casting a brief, saddened glance toward Chloe, who was busy reapplying her lip gloss while ignoring an elderly couple browsing the silver showcases. "Though I'll admit," David whispered, "the day-to-day reality on this sales floor feels very distant from that philosophy. Here, the only thing that seems to matter is the total on the receipt." Victoria kept her expression composed, looking down at her lap to hide the profound swell of emotion in her eyes. Here was a genuine artisan with an innate reverence for the craft, relegated to an entry-level floor role and bullied by managers who did not understand the very art they were paid to represent. Chloe abruptly marched over to the consultation desk, her leather-bound sales binder clutched tightly under her arm. "David, your 30-minute lunch break started 6 minutes ago," Chloe said loudly, her tone cold and intentionally humiliating. "And store operational guidelines strictly prohibit unbilled bench services for unregistered walk-in merchandise. If this customer wants a restoration, our standard intake appraisal fee for vintage, non-certified metal is $450, non-refundable, with a mandatory 4-week turnaround window." Victoria looked directly up at Chloe, her voice perfectly even. $450 just to clean and restore the curve of a simple silver band? "This is an internationally acclaimed luxury house, ma'am, not a neighborhood flea market repair booth," Chloe replied with a sarcastic, triumphant smirk. "We cater to discerning collectors. If our baseline rates exceed your current personal budget, There are several budget repair kiosks inside the subway terminal across the street. David stood up immediately, his tall frame squaring with quiet, immovable authority. "That is not how we represent this house, Chloe," David said, his voice firm and unwavering. Section 4 of our customer service charter clearly permits complimentary ultrasonic cleaning and manual shape adjustments at floor staff discretion for legacy family heirlooms. He gently lifted the black velvet tray holding the silver ring. He looked at Victoria with absolute sincerity. "Ma'am, I am officially off the clock for my lunch break right now. If you have 20 minutes to spare, I will take this back to the workshop bench. Clean the oxidation by hand and restore the inner curvature myself completely free of charge." Chloe's face flushed a deep, violent crimson. "Touch that bench off the clock for a walk-in beggar, David, and I will submit a formal disciplinary write-up to Human Resources for insubordination before this shift ends. You won't last your 90 days. David met her furious glare without blinking. "File whatever you consider necessary, Chloe. But in this store, a customer's dignity will never be turned away because of the clothes on their back." Without another word, David pushed through the heavy frosted glass doors leading into the boutique's rear artisan workshop. Victoria remained seated in the quiet alcove, watching through the clear viewing pane as the young man prepared his station. Through the glass, she saw David remove his dark vest and slip on a heavy split leather jeweler's apron. His movements were swift, disciplined, and breathtakingly precise. He did not touch the aggressive motorized high-speed buffing wheel, a machine that inexperienced clerks often used to quickly shine metal, but which inevitably ground down delicate 60-year-old engravings. Instead, David selected an antique wooden ring mandrel, a rawhide mallet, a soft horsehair brush, a block of fine jeweler's rouge compound, and a curved agate burnisher. With rhythmic, measured taps of the wooden mallet, he gently corrected the oval distortion of the band without stretching the metal. Then, using steady strokes of the agate stone and horsehair brush, he began working along the inner and outer curves. He coaxed out the deep, liquid warmth of the vintage silver alloy, lifting decades of blackened oxidation from the crevices while painstakingly protecting every hand-chiseled groove her grandfather had carved with a burin so long ago. Victoria watched his focused brow and patient hands. In every stroke of his fingers, she saw the same quiet devotion that her father and grandfather had poured into their tiny original workshop. 20 minutes later, the frosted doors opened. David returned to the showroom floor, wiping a light trace of rouge compound from his fingers with a clean rag. His eyes held a quiet, modest satisfaction. He set the velvet tray before Victoria. The silver band gleamed like moonlight on still water. The harsh scratches had been softened into a velvety satin finish. The dark tarnish was gone. Yet the rustic, human texture of the original craft remained completely intact. "Here you are, ma'am," David said softly, stepping back with his hands clasped respectfully behind him. "Your family's memory is safe and ready for another lifetime." Victoria picked up the ring. The cool metal felt smooth and alive against her skin, sliding onto her finger with the exact balance it had possessed decades ago. She reached into her simple canvas handbag, opened a weathered leather wallet, and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. She placed it onto the counter and slid it toward David. "You risked your employment, endured public disrespect from your supervisor, and gave up your personal break for a complete stranger," Victoria said, watching his facial expression with intense scrutiny. "Please accept this as a sincere token of my gratitude." David shook his head immediately, taking a polite step backward and raising his hands in refusal. "Thank you very much, ma'am, but I cannot accept that," David replied gently. "Accepting personal tips violates our store policy, but more importantly, it goes against my personal principles. My grandfather taught me that you never put a price tag on basic human decency. Knowing that this heirloom is restored and will be cherished for another generation is more than enough payment for me, Chloe scoffed audibly from behind the cash register, loud enough for nearby patrons to hear. Unbelievable. A trainee who doesn't even have the business sense to take cash when he's broke. Victoria stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of her trench coat. She looked deeply into David's honest, steady eyes, memorizing every feature of his face. What did you say your full name was, young man? David Miller, ma'am. Victoria offered him a quiet, enigmatic smile that held decades of wisdom and authority. Thank you, David Miller. You have done far more today than restore a silver band. You have reminded me why this company was founded in the first place. With that, Victoria turned, picked up her damp umbrella, and walked out through the heavy glass doors into the afternoon rain, leaving the boutique to its superficial whisperings. At 9 o'clock the following morning, the flagship boutique was bathed in dazzling autumn sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling plate glass windows. The showroom had been scrubbed to perfection, every diamond case gleaming under brilliant spotlights. Chloe stood near the main entrance reviewing quarterly sales charts with the senior floor team, her demeanor as haughty and demanding as ever. Suddenly, two sleek black executive sedans pulled up along the curb. The front passenger doors opened, and the regional sales director hurried inside, looking visibly pale, his hands trembling as he held the heavy glass doors open. A breathless, suffocating silence swept across the entire showroom as Victoria Thornton walked through the entrance. Gone was the rain-drenched beige trench coat and worn leather shoes. Victoria was draped in an impeccably tailored, bespoke charcoal gray pantsuit that accentuated her elegant authority. Her hair was styled in a polished flowing wave, and on her lapel pinned a solid platinum crest, the official insignia reserved solely for the founder and chief executive of the conglomerate. On her right hand, catching the morning light, gleamed the hand-polished silver band. Flanked by the company's chief legal officer and the global head of human resources, Victoria walked into the center of the showroom rotunda with the commanding presence of a woman who owned every square inch of the building. Chloe's breath hitched in her throat. The leather clipboard slipped from her numb fingers, crashing loudly onto the marble tiles as every drop of color drained from her face. Mrs. Thornton? Chloe stammered, her voice shaking violently as she stepped forward with an awkward, panicked bow. We were not informed of an executive board inspection this morning. Welcome to our flagship branch. Victoria stopped in the center of the marble rotunda, her cool, discerning gaze sweeping across the trembling staff before landing squarely and heavily upon Chloe. An advance notice was entirely unnecessary, Chloe, Victoria said, her voice resonant, calm, and cutting through the dead silence of the boutique like a diamond blade. Because yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I stood right here in front of your counter as an ordinary customer holding a 60-year-old family heirloom. And within 5 minutes, you declared my family's legacy to be worthless scrap metal and informed me that our boutique was too noble to serve ordinary people. Chloe began to hyperventilate, hot tears of sheer terror welling in her eyes as the other sales associates took a frightened step backward. Mrs. Thornton, please understand, I didn't recognize you. Chloe begged, her voice cracking. If I had known it was you, I would have given you our private VIP suite, served champagne, and handled everything personally. That is precisely the root of the rot, Victoria cut in with devastating clarity. You bow down to wealth because you covet a percentage of the commission, and you dismiss the humble because you believe they have nothing to offer your vanity. You wear my family's name on your lapel, but you have hollowed out the soul and integrity of this company. You believe luxury means excluding people. In truth, real luxury is the art of making every human being feel valued. Victoria turned slightly toward the head of human resources. Chloe Harrison, your employment with Thornton Jewelers is terminated immediately for gross violation of our founding ethical charter. Your security clearance is revoked. You will collect your personal items from the locker room and be escorted from the building as security stepped forward to guide the sobbing former manager out of the showroom. Victoria turned her gaze across the rotunda until she found David Miller, who stood frozen beside the workshop entrance, staring in absolute, stunned silence. Victoria walked across the showroom floor toward David, her stern executive posture melting into a genuine, warm smile. "Good morning, David," Mrs. Thornton, David whispered, his voice trembling slightly in disbelief. He looked at her lapel, then down at the ring on her hand. The silver band. It was your grandfather's, hand-poured and chiseled in 1964, in a damp basement on 4th Street, Victoria confirmed softly, holding up her hand so the morning sun illuminated the silver luster. You recognized the soul of the work when our senior managers were too blind to see it. But far more importantly, you defended a stranger's dignity when looking away and protecting your own job would have been the easy choice. Victoria turned toward her executive team and announced in a clear, authoritative tone that echoed through the showroom. Effective immediately, David Miller is promoted and transferred to our central design headquarters. He is appointed as executive curatorial assistant and master apprentice to my private atelier. She turned back to David, meeting his gaze on completely equal ground. I need someone beside me who honors the true heritage of this craft and whose hands know the language of metal and empathy. I need my right hand in the master studio to help me redesign the heart of this brand. Will you accept the position, David? A bright, confident smile broke across David's face as he stood tall. It would be the greatest honor of my life, Victoria. Over the following months, their partnership completely revitalized the company. Working side by side in the sunlit penthouse studio, David's master craftsmanship at the bench, and Victoria's visionary designs birthed an acclaimed new collection dedicated to timeless, handcrafted storytelling. And through long evenings analyzing raw stones, sketching new pieces over shared cups of black coffee, and cultivating a profound mutual respect forged in integrity, an unspoken, deep affection began to blossom between them, a connection built not on corporate power or wealth, but on the enduring truth of two people who saw the world through the exact same lens.
When we examine Victoria and David's story, we uncover a crucial psychological reality about the illusions of prestige and the fragility of human ego. In a status-driven world, people frequently confuse temporary authority with genuine personal worth. We observe individuals who, the moment they are granted a uniform of prestige, a corporate title, or access to luxury environments, begin to look down on others, forgetting that true nobility is never determined by a designer suit, a luxury price tag, or an executive bank account. As David's humble actions demonstrate, real character is never revealed when we are trying to impress our superiors. It is profoundly exposed in how we treat those who appear to have nothing to give us in return. When we choose humility, empathy, and professional integrity over arrogance, we don't just elevate the dignity of the people around us, we protect the authenticity of our own soul. The superficial armor of vanity will always crumble under the weight of time, but quiet integrity creates lasting value that no market fluctuation can ever diminish. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged purely by their outward appearance, only for the truth to teach everyone present a powerful, unforgettable lesson in humility? Please take a moment to share your personal thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your voice and perspective bring immense wisdom to our community. If this story touched your heart today, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to stay connected with our channel. Thank you for listening so attentively, and may you always walk with the quiet dignity of someone who values people over appearances.